Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing a wrap-up of the finalists for Best Novel for the Hugo Awards this year, which is 2020, if you're watching from the future. So the idea behind this project is that I've had a lot of favorite books that I found because they were winners of the Hugo Awards, so this year I decided I wanted to read all of the finalists in the Best Novel category just to see beforehand what I thought of them and hopefully expand my horizons a little bit, and also to have a little bit of fun in ranking them as I would rank them and to see who ends up winning. So the Hugo Award is audience voted. The members of Worldcon for that year vote on it. I'm not necessarily expecting that my personal opinions are going to be what everyone else thinks, so this is really just for fun. So right now I'm going to give you a ranking of what I thought of each book. Before that, I will just quickly go through and remind all of us what the 6 books in this category were, and then after the winner is announced, I will make another video talking about how I feel about that. The first finalist is The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders. This is a science fiction book about human colonists in a tidally locked world where half of it is always in daytime and half of it is always in nighttime. And there are humans that can only live in sort of the dusk zone in between those two sides, and then there's an indigenous species that they are harming with their presence. The next finalist is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. This is, I would categorize it as somewhere between science fantasy and space opera. Gideon, the main character, has been raised in a cult of necromancers, and all she wants to do is get away and join the army, but instead she is strong-armed into accompanying the heiress of the house in order to go participate in this contest to basically ascend to godhood along with representatives from all the other houses. And then it somehow turns into a bit of a locked room mystery in a haunted mansion planet. Next, we have The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley. This is near-future military science fiction about a soldier who gets recruited with dreams of being a hero and who learns the realities and the impersonal and awful nature of war. Soldiers get turned into beams of light in order to get transported to and from different battlefronts, and sometimes this has some weird and unintended consequences on them. Next, we have A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This is science fiction about an ambassador from a small independent space station who gets sent to the capital of the empire in order to figure out what happened to her predecessor. There's a lot of politics, a lot of intrigue, a bit of a mystery, and an exploration of culture and falling in love with a foreign culture that is trying to colonize your culture and what the nature of memory is. Next, we have Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. This book is almost impossible to describe. It's so hard to describe that its own cover synopsis is basically incomprehensible and seems kind of unrelated to the book. But basically, it is about 2 twins who were created by an alchemist. One of the twins has the power of numbers, the other one has the power of language. Together they are supposed to eventually mature and harness this fundamental power of the universe, but mostly it's a story about 2 kids who have a psychic link, who are growing up separated from each other, and how they find each other and are torn apart over the years, and how their relationship as siblings develops. Finally, we have The 10,000 Doors of January. This is fantasy about a young woman in the early 1900s who is raised by the wealthy employer of her father, and she discovers that there are doors into other worlds. She also receives a mysterious book that tells her more about her own origins. I would describe this as more of a coming of age story with a lot of elements of portal fantasy. So I at least appreciated most of these books. I would say most of them are books that I wouldn't have picked up on my own if I hadn't been doing this project, so I think that's a really good thing. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to do a project like this. I think it's a good way to find new favorites and to explore new things, get exposed to different kinds of books. I mean, I do read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, so I'm not exactly exploring other genres here, although it is more science fiction than I usually read, so that was an interesting change. I don't know that I would have picked up any of these books just based on the descriptions, and a few of them became new favorites, so overall, I would say that's a very good outcome. So now what I want to do is rank these books in my own order from lowest to highest. Again, this is just my personal preference. I'm going to take into account how objectively good I think the books are, but I'm mostly going to consider just how much I liked them. So I'm not going to predict what book I think will win, because I really have no idea. It's going to depend how the voters feel about it. This is just, if I were voting, which I'm not, how would I rank the books? So there was one book on this list that I couldn't finish, so that's going to go in my number 6 spot. And that was The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders. I really intended to read and review every single one of these 6 books, to be really comprehensive and to push myself a little bit, but in the end I was just really not enjoying it, and I just seem to have some kind of a block with Charlie Jane Anders. I did see some mixed responses towards this book in general, but I also could not get through her previous book, All the Birds in the Sky, which I think got more universal praise. So I don't know what it is. Like, there's just something about her writing style that I don't enjoy and can't seem to get into. So I got about a third of the way through this book before I decided it just really wasn't worth continuing to push through it, and I put it aside. A lot of people seem to really love her books, so I think there's a lot of great ideas. There's probably a lot of great things in her books. I don't really know why I don't seem to like her writing, but for me, The City in the Middle of the Night was a DNF, so we are going to put that at number 6. It was the only one of these books that I really didn't enjoy at all. In my number 5 spot is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alix E. Harrow. I thought this was quite a good debut book. It's just that there were 2 other books on this list that were also debut novels that I thought were really mind-blowing. And for me, I thought there were some weaknesses in this book. I overall enjoyed reading it. I think that she crafted characters very well. It was engaging. I just didn't love the way that all the different elements and tropes were combined together. I didn't think everything about it meshed together well into one story that I enjoyed, but I did enjoy Alix E. Harrow's writing, and I would be very excited to see what else she comes up with. I think she has another book coming out this year that looks very interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading that. Figuring out what book to put in the number 4 spot was actually really tough, but I ended up deciding to put Middlegame by Seanan McGuire there. This book is really hard to talk about, but at its core, it was about the relationship between 2 siblings, and that part of it was really powerful. There were some other elements with how the plot and narrative were constructed that I thought were interesting, but were kind of a miss in the end. But also, this is a book that the more I think back to it, the more I have positive feelings towards it, even though right when I finished it, I was feeling a little bit mixed, and I think my review of it is a little bit mixed as well. But I definitely very much enjoyed Seanan McGuire's writing. I really enjoyed her characters, and her ability to capture emotion was really strong. The tone and style of the book were great. I just felt like there were some things about how it was constructed that I didn't think quite hit the mark. But I am also reading Discount Armageddon because that's the first book in her Encrypted series, which was nominated for a Hugo Award for Best Series this year. Very different book, but I very much enjoyed that. So I think overall, I'm happy that I've started reading some Seanan McGuire, and I did overall really like Middlegame as a book. It just wasn't perfect. I was actually happy to see that it was just announced that there's going to be another book that's kind of a sequel to Middlegame. I think it's going to be about different characters, but it's going to be in the same world. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what she does there. So the reason that it was hard for me to decide what was going to be number 4 and what was going to be number 3 was that I'm putting The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley at number 3. I probably enjoyed reading Middlegame more, but I think The Light Brigade is the better book. So this is the one instance in this ranking where I am ranking the thing that I think was objectively a stronger book above the thing that I personally enjoyed. And the reason for that is because I think The Light Brigade seems like an important book that has a lot to say. I feel like I'm missing a lot of the necessary context for The Light Brigade because I haven't read a lot of military science fiction, and I've seen a lot of comparisons with this book to works by authors like Robert Heinlein, who I just haven't read. So I know in some ways this book is a commentary on this whole genre of classic military science fiction that I'm not too familiar with. I could tell though it's a really powerful story, it's very effective, and just a well-constructed book. It's not a genre that I would seek out, and I didn't totally love it because it just wasn't the kind of thing that I enjoy so much, but there's just a lot that was really well done there, so I think I need to rank it above Middlegame, which is more a kind of book that I personally would read, but I think had larger flaws. So now for number 2, that was A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This book was so well done, so accomplished, hard to believe that it was her first book. The author is a historian, and that really shows through. There is so much culture, so much knowledge, just a lot of really great things in this book. It was well constructed, really interesting. The reason this book wasn't number 1 for me was because I didn't reach a high level of emotional investment in the characters. I thought they were very well written. I understood their personalities, their motivations, their complexities. I liked them. I just didn't feel really invested in what happened to them. I didn't care about them all that much. So for me, that's what stopped this from being like a 5-star mind-blowing book. So I'm gonna say the reason that A Memory Called Empire is number 2 instead of number 1 in this ranking is because it captured my head more than it captured my heart. But I think it's an amazing book, and I really, really did like it. So my number 1, I've talked about it a fair bit on this channel, is Gideon the Ninth. This is the book that I did not expect to like. I didn't even really want to read it because I was kind of freaked out by the idea of it and the cover. I'm not really a skulls and dead people kind of reader, but I loved this book so much. It was so witty. I thought the tone was hilarious, and it really just goes to show that Tamsyn Muir made me love something that just didn't sound like a book I would even be interested in. I love this book so much that I bought it. It's the only one off this list that I decided I needed to own. I made my husband read it. I wouldn't shut up about it. I'm very excited for book number 2, which is supposed to come out next month. So for all those reasons, this book just really had to be number 1 because I just enjoyed the hell out of it. Is it as profound and complex a book as A Memory Called Empire? Probably not, but despite that, I just loved it so much, and for me that is really the most important thing in a book. I definitely did feel like it was a deep reading experience. It's just I don't see all the levels of detail and polish in this book necessarily, but it has something just very, very special and very unique that makes me want to keep coming back to it. So that is my wrap up of this year's finalists for the Hugo Award for Best Novel. I hope you've enjoyed getting to come on this journey with me. It definitely was an interesting one for me. I got to read some things I normally wouldn't have, and hopefully you enjoyed getting to hear about them. I still have to do a wrap-up video for the books that I read for the Hugo Award for Best Series, and then after August 1st, I'll do another video to look at who the winners were and what I think about that. Thanks so much for watching. Please like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me.